And talk about the latest now with Jonathan Conricus, former spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, and he's currently now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, very good to have you with us here in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with that national security memorandum. It would mean that within 45 days, Israel would have to sign off saying that it is using U.S. weapons in accordance with international law, and also that it is not blocking the entry of any U.S. aid. Will Israel be able to do so?
It's an interesting move. I think politically driven from the U.S. perspective. I think that those are the restrictions and the limitations that existed before that the U.S. has on providing military aid. So I don't really think that there's anything new of substance. Of course, the declaration is of importance, and of course Israel abides by international law, and Israel has been providing tens of thousands of trucks going into Gaza of humanitarian aid. So I don't think it would be difficult for Israel to sign off on it.
You said it came about because of political pressure. There are a lot of members of Congress who are very concerned about the current Israeli operation in Gaza. If you look at the numbers, and you know them well yourself, of course, more than 27,000 killed, and right now about according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza, so Gaza health officials, about 1.7 million people displaced, and many aid organizations have said the flow of aid has not been forthcoming, and it's not been enough to make sure that the people are supplied.
Yes, well, there's a problem with aid. One problem is that Hamas is stealing it, harboring it for themselves, or selling it at horrible 300-400% price in Gaza to Gazans, even when it's labeled intended for aid, not to be sold. So yes, there are problems, but I think Israel has been providing both through Egypt, the first stages, and now also through Israel in Kerem Shalom, as 136 Israelis are being held in Gaza. Humanitarian aid is going in. Yeah. Yes, the hostages are inside Gaza, yet Israel is still providing humanitarian aid. And there's many in Israel, including the families, who think that that is an absolute travesty.
We'll come back to the hostages. I'll ask you about them in a moment. But the other piece of information, news we saw, is that the Prime Minister has ordered an evacuation of Rafah, possibly preparing for a ground invasion. Rafah is where so many Gazans went to at the beginning of this operation. Aerial footage shows that at least half of the buildings in Gaza are destroyed. Where are they supposed to go to?
Yeah, ideally, they would have gone where Israel asked them to go in the early stages of the war when I was still in uniform.
To Rafah?
No, to a humanitarian zone that Israel asked to have in the northwestern part of Khan Yunis, which is a sandy area where Hamas doesn't have any infrastructure. That is where Israel asked to have a humanitarian zone.
Nearly 2 million people?
Well, it would have been much better than being in Rafah and in Khan Yunis. I think you would agree that if UNRWA had agreed to actually create a humanitarian zone there, which Israel said, we are not going to strike there because Hamas has no infrastructure there, so it would be the safest place to be. Arguably much better than being in Rafah.
How can the the IDF carry forth an operation at this point, looking at the situation in Rafah? You know that there are tens of thousands of people now sheltering there. Indeed. And there's not much international support either. We saw what the White House has said, that this would be a disaster. President Biden saying the Israeli operation has gone over the top. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I think it will be very interesting to discover when Israeli troops get to those tunnels underneath Rafah, when they get the hands and see, and we will have cameras there to show the world what went on for many, many years, from Egypt into Gaza. It'll be very interesting to see, because I see a lot of pressure, US, Egyptian, now also European, into don't go to Rafah. Frankly, I don't think that...
It's the question of what it takes to get there.
Yes, but frankly, I don't think that the Egyptians are very concerned about the fate of Gazans. They are concerned about other things. What Israel is concerned about, and I don't think that there's much flexibility, is to get rid of these tunnels, because as long as they're open, Hamas or any other terrorist organization will have the ability to flow weapons into Gaza again. And that's, of course, something that Israel cannot allow.
I mentioned I wanted to ask you about the fate of the hostages. We spoke to Abby Owen yesterday, who has had a family member who's currently being held in captivity, and also 2 family members who were killed as well. I just want to play you a brief clip of what she said.
I have to believe that bringing them home is the only way forward, because it's the only way we as a country move forward. This was a social contract that we would be protected by our government and military, and it was broken on the 7th. And in order to begin repairing that, we need to see Ofer and Hirsch and Naama and every single hostage come home.
What do you think of that? Do you think the Israeli government is putting this stated aim of eliminating Hamas above what the hostages' families have said they want to see, which is a ceasefire and bringing hostages home?
I can feel the pain. I cannot imagine what they're going through. I would have been very happy to have seen the IDF successfully getting hostages out, rescuing them. Sadly, we haven't seen that, and unfortunately, the Israeli government is left in a very difficult situation. I don't think that it would be possible for Israel to accept the outrageous terms that Hamas has put forward, or using the pain and the suffering of these families in order to make outlandish demands. They know that Israel isn't going to end the war.
We have to leave the conversation there, but Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us in our studio today.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it.